right, let's talk about how to classify or categorize statements. Here's the statement we're going to work with. If you're a morally decent person, then you've never told a lie. However, you are in fact a morally decent person, even though you have told a lie. And my question to you is, does this statement make sense? And maybe your response to that is, well, that depends. What do you mean makes sense? Fair question, okay? What does it mean when we say that what's being said either makes sense or it doesn't make sense? In the casual interactions that we have with one another in our daily lives, we might use this phrase makes sense to really indicate whether or not we understand what's being said. So we might be explaining something to someone and we say, does that make sense? And what we are really asking is, do you understand what I'm saying? Or somebody else might use the phrase make sense to indicate that they agree with what we're saying. We might say something to them and they go, yeah, that makes sense, okay? But we're not going to use the phrase make sense in exactly that way. We're going to use it a little bit differently. When we say that a statement makes sense, we're saying one of two things. We're saying either, you know what, it seems like what's being said cannot possibly be false. It seems like it has to be true. Or it seems like what's being said could be true. I can't think of a reason why it's impossible for what you're saying to be true. It seems like it could be. But if we're looking at what's being said and we look at this and we think to ourselves, there is no way that could possibly be true. That seems like a statement that would always be false. Okay, that's what we mean when we say that doesn't make sense. So now we look back at our original statement here. If you're a morally decent person, then you've never told a lie. However, you are in fact a morally decent person, even though you have told a lie. And again, I put the question to you. With our new definition of makes sense out in front of us, does this statement make sense? Yes or no? Okay. Well, we can prove whether or not you just answered that question correctly by creating a truth table for this sentence. Okay, so we assign the simple statements that comprise this compound proposition letters. We're going to use M to represent the statement, you are a morally decent person, and L to represent the statement, you have told a lie. And then we're going to symbolically represent this statement, okay? So if you are a morally decent person, then it is not the case that you have told a lie. However, you are in fact a morally decent person and you've told a lie, or even though you've told a lie. So we've got our statement written out symbolically using operators and letters. And now what we get to do, yes, use L equals 2 to the n. What goes in that n position again? Oh, did you say the number of unique simple statements that make up the compound statement? Yes. And we're always going to be able to identify what that number is by looking at the statements and how many letters we have that we're working with. We're not going to look over here and say, oh, I have 4 statements that comprise this compound proposition, because we really don't. We have 2, M and L. So we're going to put 2 in that position of n, and we're going to calculate that out, which gives us 4, and that tells us, okay, draw 4 lines underneath your statement, okay? And now again, we're going to come back to this number 4, and we're going to say, okay, I'm going to divide that now by 2, and that's going to give me 2. And what that's going to do is tell me how many T's followed by how many F's to put underneath the first letter on the left-hand side of my truth table. And I'm going to remember, this is super important, that the same letter has to have the same truth value on each line. So if M is true on lines 1 and 2 here, it has to also be true on lines 1 and 2 here. And same thing on lines 3 and 4. It's false here, so it's got to be false here. And so when I'm constructing my truth tables, I'm always starting on the left-hand side, moving rightward, and I'm always looking down the line to see other occurrences of letters that I've already filled out truth values for. All right, so now I come down here. I grab onto that number 2 and I divide it by 2, and that gives me 1. And I can now put alternating T's and F's underneath my L both times it appears. Okay? Now guess what I get to do? I get to calculate the truth values for the component parts of this compound proposition. And I'm always going to start with tilde, because tilde I know is going to be the opposite of whatever it operates on. So if L is true, tilde L's got to be false. If L is false, tilde L's got to be true, and so on and so forth. And I'm going to do that, and now I get to calculate inside my parentheses, okay? And so I'm going to fill out all my truth values, and when I do that, I can calculate the truth value of the main operator, the dot here, okay? And I know that anytime one side or the other or both of the dot is false, the whole dot is false, okay? Now, this reveals to us something interesting. In every single possible world that could exist, all 4 of them, this statement is never true. It's always false. Okay? And that means the sentence doesn't make sense because there's no way for it to be true. Because remember, what we do when we create a truth table is we create all the possible true-false combinations for the simple sentences that make up our compound propositions. And then we use our knowledge of the operators to figure out what's the truth value of this entire statement in every conceivable combination of true-false values. And we see here, this statement is never true. There's no way to make this statement true, okay? Now, in our studies, we're going to have a really specific category we put this kind of statement in, okay? This is called a self-contradictory statement. The main operator of a self-contradictory statement is always false in the truth table, okay? It's never true. That statement is never true. And this is, by definition, the kind of statement that can never make sense.